Hello, my name is Scott McKern, and today I'm doing something a little different. I'm going to do a book review. Now, I generally don't like book reviews. I don't do many of them. There are probably only 2 or 3 I may ever do. I would rather explain a topic than recommend a book. I can recommend books, but I'd like to explain the topic first. I've given away a lot of books in my life, and I find people usually don't have the time to read them. Today I want to share something extremely special, exquisitely special. This book is called A Course in Miracles, and I'm going to show it to you. This is what it looks like, okay? Now the reason I want to show it to you is because this book came out in 1975, and there's some pirate versions, there's other versions. A Course in Miracles combined volume, and it's by the Foundation for Inner Peace. This is the copy that I'm talking about. There are pirate copies and other things that I don't want to have confuse you. When I first heard about A Course in Miracles, it was described to me, well, as a course. And that was a big turnoff. I don't want to have to go to a school to take a course. I mean, it's bad enough this thing is like 1,500 pages long. The last thing I want to do is take a course, get a 1,500 page book. No, none of that is true. Okay, this is not actually a course. The name of the book is A Course in Miracles. It's there's essentially 5 parts to it, but all 5 parts are in the book. So I just want to give you a brief history. This book is not connected to any religion, okay, which helps a lot. It doesn't matter what religion you're part of or not part of. It makes no difference at all. This book is in perfect harmony with all religions. This book is essentially a simplification of all religions. This was written by a couple of people who are not religious at all. They were both in the psychiatric profession, actually, and basically they're atheists. They're not atheists now, but they had a tremendous spiritual experience. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history on this. Let me just move this down. Okay. A Course in Miracles began with the sudden decision of 2 people to join in a common goal. Their names were Helen Schucman and William Thetford. Professors of medical psychology at Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York City. It does not matter who they were, except that the story shows that with God all things are possible. They were anything but spiritual. Their relationship with each other was difficult and often strained. And they were concerned with personal and professional acceptance and status. Okay, they wanted acceptance and status. They were caught up in the ego. They were agnostic. Okay, caught up with acceptance and status. In general, they had considerable investment in the values of the world. Their lives were hardly in accord with anything that the Course advocates. Helen, the one who received the material, describes herself as psychologist, educator, conservative in theory, and atheistic in belief. I was working in a prestigious and highly academic setting, and then something happened that triggered a chain of events I could never have predicted. The head of my department unexpectedly announced that he was tired of the angry and aggressive feelings and attitudes reflected, and concluded that there must be another way. As if on cue, I agreed to help him find it. Apparently this course is the other way. So she and this other professor had this profound spiritual experience, and as a result, they both claimed that this book was literally dictated to them from above. Now, whether we believe that is true or not, I suspect, given how it was written, that perhaps it is true. Now, this book is not the easiest book to find. It was widely published in the 70s and 80s. Now it's a little bit harder to find, but you can get it off of Amazon. I contacted them, and you can get a used copy of that for $10. That's pretty cheap. So it's not a course, it's a book. One book. Everything is in that one book. $10 from Amazon. That's for a used copy. Brand new soft cover, $30. If you want the hardcover, which I don't, brand new, $60. If you don't have a credit card, you don't want to deal with Amazon, go to any bookstore. They probably won't have it, but you can order it. So it's very easy to get, but don't expect to find it in a regular bookstore. You'd have to order it. Now, what was recommended to me is that I read another book first. I'm going to show that to you. This book is called The Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard. Now, this book, well, it's about 400 pages long. There's humor in the book. It's a bit crass, male humor. I found it lightened up what would otherwise have been a difficult book to get through. Not that it isn't interesting, it's quite interesting, but it's a long read. If you find you're not inclined to that type of humor, there is another book. I can't show it to you, but I'll tell you what it's called. It's called A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. You've probably heard of her. After A Course in Miracles came out in the 70s, she wrote tons of books about it. She became Oprah Winfrey's #1 spiritual advisor for many years. And right now, Marianne Williamson, famous and wealthy as she is, she's running for president. She's one of the many Democrats running for president. If she gets a nomination, she'll be running against Donald Trump. So that's who she is. I've read these books. They're pretty good. If you're a keener, then you can dive right into A Course in Miracles. Now you might say, okay, all right, Scott, why are you doing a book review? Well, the book has nothing to do with me. And as I've said before, there are many books written on the subject of ego versus enlightenment, ego versus Holy Spirit, ego versus true love. True love, enlightenment, Holy Spirit, it's all the same idea. Whatever it is you understand, go with that, because that works. Now, I found all of this to be extremely useful to me. I did read Gary Renard's book first. I read all of his books, actually. I haven't been that much into Marianne Williamson, but I like her book, A Return to Love. A Course in Miracles has been profoundly useful to me. Now, I like the fact that it was written by two people in the secular psychiatric profession, totally atheistic, had nothing to do with it. They had nothing but contempt for spirituality, religion, and yet somehow they had a spiritual experience and came up with what is probably the most intelligent combination of spirituality and science, simplified to the point where anybody can understand it, and it's not in conflict with anybody's religion. It's perfect just like it is. The only reason the book is thick is because it involves repetition. Because they're in the psychiatric profession, they understand that to deprogram yourself from the ego is extremely difficult to do. From conception until today, we have been brainwashed into believing that the ego is the only source of information. We are supposed to be gleaning information from our higher self, from nature, from God, from our higher self. This enlightenment should be our source of information, but instead we are getting all of our information, essentially pulling it out of our own butt. I mean, that's what the ego really is. We're pulling it out of our own butt. Everything we get from the ego is contrary, negative, belittling. The ego believes in separation. Everybody else is completely separate from us. Anything we can do to trip them up and lower them down makes us feel good because it makes us feel superior. The ego is all about comparison, okay? Enlightenment, the Holy Spirit, it's all about true love. It's all about unity. So this difference between unity and separation is best described, I would say, in this book, A Course in Miracles. So I'm going to be talking a lot more about that and how that book was beneficial to me. I'll express that in the next video. I just want to give you an idea of why I'm doing a book review. I am not going to do many. I don't like book reviews, but this one is particularly important. There's one section in the book where it's about 365 pages long, and the reason is the idea is to read one page every day for a year, okay? So this is the deprogramming, okay? If you get a different perspective on how the ego is different from true love, different from enlightenment, different from the Holy Spirit, how the ego is the opposite of all good things, a different perspective on the same thing every day for 365 days is one of the things this book offers as a means of deprogramming ourselves. That is fantastic, because of all the books written, that's the only one that really gets into the crux of how brainwashed we are into the ego and gives us some real-world tools that anybody can use. Real-world tools that anybody can use, and you don't have to think of it as a 1,300-page, 1,500-page book, whatever it is, because if you're only reading one page a day, who cares? It's not a big deal. It's not something that is going to be difficult for you to do. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. If you want to share this, if you're familiar with A Course in Miracles, and you probably are, then feel free to share this, because I'm going to follow this up with another video going into greater detail. So if you like it, feel free to like and subscribe, share it with your friends, and thank you very much for your time.